The blackness of space stretched endlessly, a canvas dotted with bright, cold stars. Among those stars, a small fleet of ships moved silently, gliding like shadows across the void. They were not warships. They carried no cannons or visible weapons, only smooth hulls and the faint glow of their engines. On board the lead vessel, Ambassador Eric of the Nilari species sat in the observation deck, staring at a small blue dot in the distance. That dot was Earth. Eric had traveled across countless star systems, negotiating with hundreds of civilizations. Most had been easy, fragile species who feared outsiders, eager to trade or bend to the will of more advanced races. But Earth, this planet was different. There was something about it that unsettled him. Its people were primitive, yes, lacking the technology to leave their own solar system. Yet something deeper stirred in the reports the Nilari had received. Stories of resilience, of ingenuity, of humans surviving impossible odds against nature, disease, and even each other. His aide, a smaller, more nervous Nilari named Trell, floated beside him. "Are you sure we should be here, Ambassador?" Trell asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Reports say humans are unpredictable. They are primitive, yes, but there is something else. Something dangerous." Eric did not answer immediately. He continued to watch the blue planet grow larger in the viewport. It was beautiful, alive, fragile. Oceans gleamed like sapphires, and continents spread like green and brown mosaics. White clouds drifted lazily above its surface. There was a life force here, raw and untamed, unlike any he had seen among other young civilizations. "They are not yet a threat," Eric finally said, his tone calm but distant, "and that is why we are here. Diplomacy first. Words before weapons. That is how we avoid mistakes." The Nilari ships moved closer to Earth's orbit. Across the solar system, human sensors detected the alien presence almost immediately. Earth's space agencies scrambled jets and satellites confirming the data. But no one panicked. Humanity had seen strange objects before, but nothing like this. These were ships built for purpose, for travel, for contact, not for war. In the United Nations Space Command, Captain Lila Harris watched the incoming fleet with a mix of caution and awe. She had trained for crises, for alien invasions, for scenarios that existed only in simulations. But now, seeing real ships approach her home planet, she felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mixture of excitement, fear, and the quiet thrill of possibility. "Prepare the diplomatic team," she said. "We go with words first. Always words first." Meanwhile, Eric's crew readied themselves for their first encounter with humans. Every protocol, every gesture, every word had been rehearsed countless times. They had to appear calm, collected, and respectful. Even a single mistake could end in disaster. And yet, Eric sensed a tension in the air that could not be ignored. Humans were clever, far cleverer than their technology suggested. They had survived plagues, wars, environmental collapse, and countless challenges that should have ended their species. As the Nilari ships entered the edge of Earth's atmosphere, the planet's blue glow reflected across their sleek metallic surfaces. The sight was mesmerizing. Even the most hardened ambassadors felt their pride soften in the face of this beautiful living world. And yet, underneath that beauty, Eric felt a warning, a whisper that this species, small and seemingly weak, carried a power no one could fully measure. For a long moment, silence filled the observation deck. No one spoke. The hum of the engines and the distant twinkle of stars were the only sounds. Then Eric's voice broke the stillness. "We come in peace," he said. Not to his aides, not even to the planet below, but as a promise to himself. "And yet, we must be careful. Humans are not to be underestimated. On Earth," Captain Harris and her team were already preparing their own words of greeting, unaware that this moment, small and careful as it seemed, would mark the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, a chapter where humans would reveal that even the smallest species could command respect, not through fear but through courage, intelligence, and unbreakable will. The alien fleet slowed as it neared the designated landing zone. Blue oceans and green continents passed beneath their hulls, a silent stage for the first meeting between two civilizations that, until now, had only heard of each other in whispers across the stars. And somewhere deep inside, Eric felt it, the unmistakable, unsettling sense that history itself was about to change. The human space station orbiting Mars gleamed in the sunlight, a mix of silver metal and glass domes reflecting the red planet below. The Nilari Diplomats ships docked carefully, their engines humming softly. Ambassador Eric and his aides floated into the docking bay, their movements precise and controlled. Humans awaited them on the platform. Captain Lila Harris and her team, composed of diplomats, scientists, and observers, their expressions calm but alert. The first words were exchanged politely. Greetings in multiple languages, gestures of peace, smiles carefully measured. Yet beneath the outward politeness there was tension. The Nylari envoys, trained for centuries in diplomacy, felt something unusual. Humans listened, but not with fear. Humans listened, but with curiosity. Their eyes did not dart away. Their bodies did not tremble. They were calm but fully aware, as if expecting the unexpected. Eric studied them closely. He had met thousands of species, but humans were different. There was a spark in their gaze, a mix of determination and intelligence that unsettled even the most experienced Nylari diplomat. "Do they know something we don't?" Trell whispered, his voice tight. "They do not seem impressed, and yet they do not seem afraid." Eric's mind worked quickly, analyzing, calculating. Diplomacy required patience, but patience could only go so far when subtle warnings were hidden in plain sight. The humans spoke of trade and research, of shared exploration of the galaxy. But the words carried an undercurrent, a quiet assertion that Earth would not be easily coerced or tricked. Captain Harris guided the meeting with gentle authority. "We are honored by your visit," she said. "Earth welcomes dialogue, understanding, and cooperation. But we will always protect our people. Always." Her voice was calm, soft, but it carried a weight that made even the most confident Nylari pause. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. On the surface, humans seemed simple, fragile even. But every sentence, every pause, every glance hinted at something more. They were not reckless, not naive. They were observant, strategic, and patient. Every word carried a hidden strength. In the observation deck of the station, Eric's aides recorded every nuance of human behavior. Their notes grew longer with each passing hour, but so did their anxiety. Something about these humans defied the patterns Eric had studied for decades. They were not predictable. They were not controllable. And for the first time in his long career, Eric felt a twinge of fear, not for himself but for the mission. Trell spoke again, almost in a whisper. "Ambassador, maybe we underestimated them. Their technology may seem basic compared to ours, but their minds are dangerous." Eric nodded, his jaw tight. He had been aware of the stories, of humanity's history of survival against impossible odds. But seeing it in person, seeing the calm confidence of the humans, it was different. Throughout the discussions, small signs of human ingenuity appeared. They asked questions that revealed more than curiosity. They tested the Nylari understanding of physics, diplomacy, and strategy. Each answer the aliens gave seemed to be measured yet subtly evaluated. Humans did not need weapons to assert power. Their intelligence, their courage, and their unity were enough. By the end of the first day of talks, the atmosphere shifted. The Nylari envoys, trained to expect submission, realized that these humans would not submit. They would negotiate, yes. They would speak politely, yes. But they would never yield when it mattered most. As night fell over the red deserts of Mars below, the station hummed with quiet activity. Humans returned to their quarters, reviewing notes and preparing for the next day. The aliens, meanwhile, gathered in hushed voices, their confidence shaken. "We came expecting a simple mission," one envoy said. "Instead, we found a species that might be more than we imagined." Eric stared at the window, looking at the glowing blue marble that was Earth. For all its beauty, its seas and forests, it held something far more dangerous than any weapon, something the Nylari could not measure or calculate. It was will, human will, and it was unbreakable. In that silent moment, Eric understood that diplomacy here would not be simple. It would not be just words. The humans had shown, without any action, that they were a force to be respected. The galaxy had underestimated them, and the Nylari might be about to learn that underestimating Earth could be a mistake they would never forgive. The next morning, sunlight glinted off the glass domes of the Mars station, casting long shadows over the docking bays. Ambassador Eric and his aides prepared for another day of talks, their expressions calm on the surface, though inside tension rippled like an electric current. The humans awaited them again, organized and quiet. their faces showing neither fear nor arrogance. They were ready. The first part of the meeting began with polite words, gestures of friendship, and promises of cooperation. But as the conversation deepened, subtle probes emerged. Humans asked about the Nylari fleet's capabilities, their starship technology, and the scope of their alliances. Each question was carefully worded, precise yet seemingly casual. The aliens answered carefully, offering limited details. Still, the questions had an edge. They tested, measured, and observed. Eric noticed it immediately. Humans were not just curious, they were evaluating, calculating, understanding the reach of Nylari power. And the more they spoke, the more Eric realized a truth he could no longer ignore. Humans were not naive, they were strategic. They had a mind for war and peace alike, a balance that many species lacked. One of the junior human diplomats, a young woman with dark hair and keen eyes, leaned forward. "Ambassador Eric," she asked, her tone soft yet commanding, "what would happen if a species chose to resist a superior fleet? Have your species ever faced a civilization that would not surrender?" The room fell quiet. Trell glanced at Eric, his face pale. The question was simple, but the implication was sharp, almost like a blade. Eric's voice remained steady. "We prefer cooperation," he said carefully, "not conflict. Resistance is rare. Most species recognize advantage and choose wisely." The human smiled faintly. "And yet some species do not choose wisely. Some resist even when it seems impossible. How would your fleet respond to that?" Her eyes met Eric's directly, steady and unflinching. Eric's jaw tightened. He could feel the unease in his aides. No other species had spoken to him this way. Most accepted the Nylari superiority without question. Humans did not. And that refusal, that quiet defiance, sent a chill through the seasoned diplomat. After the meeting, Eric and his aides retreated to the observation deck. The blue planet below seemed serene, peaceful, and yet it hid a force the Nylari had not anticipated. "They are clever," Trell whispered. "Too clever. I do not like this. They are dangerous." Eric remained silent for a long moment, staring at the oceans and continents far below. The reports he had read were now tangible. Humans had survived plagues, wars, and environmental collapse with nothing but their intelligence, determination, and unity. They were adaptable, resourceful, and resilient. And now, face to face, the reality of that strength became undeniable. Yet pride and habit made Eric hesitant. The Nylari were used to control, to the certainty of their superiority. To admit the humans might match them, even in spirit, was almost impossible. "We came for diplomacy," Eric said at last. "We will not threaten them. We must trust our words are enough." Trell shook his head. "Trust, Ambassador, they do not follow fear or words alone. Their resilience, it is not calculable. Every measure we have, every tactic we know, may not work. If we underestimate them, we risk everything." For hours, Eric sat silently in the observation deck, his gaze fixed on Earth. The calm blue marble below hid a species unlike any he had encountered. They were not violent without cause, yet they would not yield when challenged. A subtle, unshakable force radiated from them, and it unsettled the Nylari more than any weapon or fleet could. As night fell over Mars, the station's lights flickered softly. The humans had retreated to their quarters, and the aliens were left to ponder their next move. A quiet unease settled over Eric. He had underestimated them. He had assumed diplomacy would be simple, that words alone could maintain control. But humans had already shown that control could not be assumed. Somewhere deep in his mind, Eric felt a warning he could not ignore. This species, small and seemingly fragile, carried within them a will and intelligence that might surpass expectation. And that warning, though unspoken, echoed louder than any threat. Humans were not to be underestimated. For the first time, the Nylari realized that history might be about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. Humanity was clever, unyielding, and far stronger than they had imagined. And soon, the truth of that strength would become impossible to ignore. The calm of the Martian orbit was shattered by a sudden tremor through the space station's sensors. A massive object was entering the solar system, moving with a speed and presence that no ordinary ship could match. At first, the aliens thought it was a misreading, a glitch in their instruments. But the readings kept coming. An enormous vessel, larger than any they had ever encountered, cutting through space with quiet authority. Ambassador Eric was the first to see it on the main observation deck. The ship appeared suddenly on the horizon, massive and gleaming, reflecting the light of the distant sun. Its hull was not elegant like the Nilari ships, but functional, brutal in its design, a clear statement of strength. Eric froze, his heart tightening in a way he had never felt before. What is that?" whispered Trell, his voice barely audible. The smaller envoy floated closer to the viewport, eyes wide with disbelief. "It cannot be humans?" How?" The humans on the station, however, seemed calm. Captain Lila Harris and her team watched the approaching vessel with quiet pride. It was the Dauntless, Earth's newest Titan-class ship, the largest starship humanity had ever built. Its engines glowed faintly, and its weapons, though silent now, radiated latent power, the kind that could destroy fleets, even planets, if provoked. Eric felt a chill run down his spine. He had underestimated them. Every calculation, every assumption, every strategy had assumed that humans were limited by their primitive technology. But this ship, it changed everything. The Dauntless moved slowly into orbit, positioning itself between the alien fleet and Mars. The aliens watched in stunned silence as its shield shimmered faintly, a protective aura that hinted at power beyond imagination. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The ship itself was a message. Humanity would not be intimidated, and they would not be fooled. Trell could not hide his fear. "Ambassador? They have built this? We thought they were weak, primitive. But this..." His voice broke off, and he swallowed hard. We cannot control them." Eric remained silent, his mind racing. The Diplomats had come seeking peace, hoping that words could carry them through. But now, standing before the reality of human power, he realized that their assumptions were dangerously wrong. These humans were not just clever, they were prepared. They were ready for anything. And the Dauntless was a warning. Challenge Earth and face consequences unlike any in galactic history. On the station, Captain Harris remained composed. She turned to the Nilari envoys, her voice calm but firm. "This ship is not a threat to you. It is a symbol that we protect our home, our people, and our allies. You may come in peace, and we welcome that. But understand this, Earth is not naive. We are not weak, and we do not forgive easily." The aliens absorbed her words, their minds spinning with new calculations and fears. They had assumed diplomacy would be simple. They had assumed humans could be reasoned with, manipulated, or measured. But the Dauntless disproved every assumption. Humanity's courage, intelligence, and resourcefulness now had weight measured in firepower, in engineering, and in resolve. For hours, the observation deck remained quiet. The Nilari could only stare at the massive vessel, a floating testament to human ingenuity and willpower. Eric understood more clearly than ever that they had misjudged Earth. This was no longer a negotiation of words alone. It was a negotiation of respect, of recognizing a species that refused to be underestimated. As the Dauntless's engines hummed softly, casting a faint blue light across the station, Eric felt a mix of fear and awe. Humans were terrifying not because they sought war, but because they would never back down. Every calculation the Nilari had made, every strategy they thought would succeed, now seemed fragile. And in that moment, Eric knew the truth. History was shifting. A small blue planet, once assumed insignificant, had arrived on the galactic stage with the force of a Titan. Humanity was no longer a species to observe from a distance. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The alien diplomats floated silently in the observation deck, their eyes fixed on the Dauntless hovering in orbit above Mars. Its massive hull glimmered in the sunlight, casting reflections across the station's metal walls. Every Nilari aboard felt a weight pressing down on them, not of gravity, but of realization. They had miscalculated. They had underestimated humans, and now that mistake was visible for all to see. Ambassador Eric's hands tightened on the railing. He had traveled across galaxies, met species that fought wars for millennia, and negotiated treaties that shaped star systems. But never had he encountered a species that combined intelligence, courage, and resolve so completely. Humans did not seem afraid. They did not beg for mercy. They did not plead. They simply existed, calmly, prepared to defend what was theirs. Captain Lila Harris watched the alien faces carefully. She could see their fear, subtle but undeniable, and she knew that her people had already won the first victory, not with weapons but with presence. The Dauntless was more than a ship. It was a statement. Humanity was willing to talk, willing to cooperate, but they would never be cowed. One of the junior Nilari envoys, trembling slightly, whispered to Trell, "They have no fear." "How can they be so calm?" Trell shook his head, his own voice low. "It is not fearlessness. It is certainty. They know their strength and they trust it. They trust each other." Uric closed his eyes, feeling a strange mix of dread and admiration. His people had always relied on calculated superiority, logic, numbers, and technology. But humans were unpredictable, not because of recklessness, but because of unity, courage, and unshakable will. No calculation could fully account for that. Below the observation deck, human diplomats prepared quietly. They did not shout, they did not wave weapons, they did not attempt to intimidate. Their calmness was itself a weapon. Every gesture was measured, every word deliberate. They knew the aliens were watching, analyzing, and waiting for a sign of weakness, and there was none. For hours, neither side spoke. Silence filled the station like a tangible force pressing against every soul aboard. The Nilari envoys whispered among themselves, sharing anxious glances. Uric remained still, his thoughts racing. This mission, meant to be simple diplomacy, had become a lesson in humility. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their strength was not in brute force alone. It was in heart, mind, and unity combined. Finally, Captain Harris broke the silence, her voice calm, clear, and firm. "We came here to speak, not to fight. But understand this. We will not bow to threats. We will not be intimidated, and we will not yield when our people are at stake. If you wish for peace, it must be mutual. If you wish to test our resolve, you will be surprised." Uric's aides shifted uncomfortably. These words were simple, polite even, but their meaning was clear. Humans were not negotiating from a position of weakness. They were negotiating from a position of power, the power of resolve, courage, and the promise that their species would survive, no matter the odds. The Dauntless hung silently in orbit, a titan in blue and silver. It did not move aggressively, but it did not need to. Its presence alone was enough to silence fear, demand respect, and alter calculations. Every Nilari aboard the station could feel it. Humanity had made a choice. They were ready, and they would not back down. As darkness fell over the Martian deserts, the station remained a silent stage for the first meeting between two civilizations. Humans returned to their quarters, but the calm remained. The Nilari gathered to discuss, to analyze, to understand what had just happened. But deep inside, every thought returned to one undeniable truth. They had underestimated humans. Uric's voice was quiet, almost to himself. "We thought we understood them. We thought they were simple. But they are more, far more than we imagined. And now we must choose carefully, for every decision from this point forward carries weight we cannot measure." The first day of diplomacy ended not with explosions or threats, but with silence, charged, tense, and full of unspoken respect. Humans had not fought, yet they had already won. The galaxy had underestimated them, and the consequences of that mistake were only beginning to reveal themselves. The Nilari diplomats retreated to their quarters aboard the station, their minds a storm of fear and disbelief. They had arrived expecting a simple mission, an easy negotiation, perhaps a minor agreement. But humans had changed the rules without a word. The massive Dauntless in orbit was not a threat aimed at them, yet it carried a silent warning stronger than any weapon. Earth would protect itself, and it would not be intimidated. Ambassador Uric paced the observation deck, his long limbs moving slowly as he tried to think clearly. Every calculation he had relied upon now seemed fragile. Humans were clever, unpredictable, and fearless in a way that did not fit the Nilari understanding of power. Technology alone had never been the measure of strength. It was will, courage, and unity that had always defined true power, and humans possessed all three in abundance. Trell floated beside him, eyes wide with apprehension. "Ambassador, what do we do? We cannot simply leave, but we also cannot push them. If we misstep, it could end badly." Uric nodded slowly. "We must choose carefully. Our pride wants control. Our tradition demands authority. But logic tells us they cannot be underestimated. Every word we speak, every gesture we make, could tip the balance between peace and disaster. Below them, the humans prepared quietly. Captain Harris reviewed reports with her officers, but she did not panic. The humans had faced crises before on Earth and in space. They had survived worse. Their strength was not only in weapons or shields, it was in courage, determination, and the unshakable belief that their home and their people must endure. Back on the station, the Nylari held a council. Some argued for caution, for retreat, for diplomacy with extreme care. Others pushed for pride, insisting that no species should dare to challenge Nylari authority. Voices rose, tension crackling like electricity, but Eric remained silent, watching the humans below and the dauntless above. He realized something profound. Pride without wisdom could lead to ruin. And in that room filled with fear and arrogance, humans had already shown the better path. After long deliberation, Eric spoke. "We have a choice," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "We can cling to pride and risk war, or we can embrace peace and learn from them. I think we have underestimated them. History is on the line. We must tread carefully, or we will pay a price we cannot afford." Trell nodded slowly, relief and fear mingling in his expression. "They are not just a species. They are a force. I think you are right, Ambassador." Across the observation deck, Eric watched the humans with a growing sense of awe. Every action they took was deliberate, calm, and measured. There was no panic, no desperation, only the quiet assurance that they would protect their people, their planet, and their place in the galaxy. The Dauntless hung in orbit like a guardian, a statement of strength without aggression. For the first time, Eric understood the true meaning of power. It was not the size of a fleet or the deadliness of weapons. It was courage. It was unity. It was the will to stand firm, even when faced with uncertainty or danger. And humans, small and seemingly fragile, had all of it in abundance. That evening, as the red sun set behind the Martian horizon, the Nylari delegation prepared to meet the humans once more. This time there was humility in their posture, caution in their words, and respect in their hearts. The aliens had arrived thinking they would teach a lesson. Instead, they had learned one of their own, a lesson about courage, about unity, and about a species that refused to be underestimated. Captain Harris greeted them with a gentle smile, unaware of the profound effect her people had already made. The humans had not fired a single shot. They had not raised a weapon. Yet their presence, their calm, and their determination had spoken louder than any fleet. Eric looked around at his aides and then back at Earth, silently acknowledging what he had learned. Humans were more than clever, more than resilient. They were titans in spirit. And the choice the Nylari now faced was simple, yet profound. Respect the humans, or face the consequences of pride. In that quiet, electric moment, both species understood something vital. Humanity had made its stance clear, and the galaxy for the first time had no doubt. Earth was no longer a planet to negotiate with lightly. Earth was a force. The observation deck of the Mars station was quiet, almost eerily so. The Nylari diplomats floated silently, their eyes fixed on the enormous Dauntless orbiting above. The Titan-class ship, massive and unyielding, glinted under the sunlight, a living symbol of human strength and resolve. For hours no one spoke. Every heartbeat, every breath carried weight. The humans did not shout, they did not threaten, yet their presence was louder than any cannon or missile. Captain Lila Harris stood at the front of the deck, her hands folded calmly. She had met alien envoys before, but this moment was different. The Nylari were not just curious, they were uneasy. Their pride, arrogance, and centuries of assumed superiority were cracking beneath the quiet force of humanity. And Harris knew it. She had trained her entire life for moments like this, and now her species' courage would speak louder than words. Ambassador Eric finally broke the silence, his voice low and hesitant. We have underestimated you," he admitted. It was the first true sign of vulnerability the humans had seen. "Your people, your resolve, it is unlike anything we expected. We thought you were primitive. We thought we could control, manipulate, or predict you, but we were wrong." Harris nodded slowly, meeting his gaze steadily. "Earth does not bow to threats. We do not surrender to fear. We protect what is ours always, but we will not seek war without reason. If you came for dialogue, then peace is possible. But know this, we are ready for anything. The Nilari exchanged anxious glances. Words alone could not describe the weight of the truth now pressing upon them. Humans were not a species to be measured by technology or fleet size alone. Their courage, intelligence, and unity were a force of their own. The dauntless, immense, and silent was proof that humans could defend themselves, their planet and their ideals against any threat in the galaxy. Trell's voice trembled slightly. Ambassador, they are not just clever. They are terrifying, not because of weapons, but because of their will, their unity, their determination. We cannot calculate it. We cannot predict it. Yurik nodded, his long fingers gripping the railing. He felt awe, fear, and something he had never felt before, a deep, reluctant respect. For centuries, the Nilari had dominated negotiations, confident in their superiority. Now, face to face with humanity, he realized how fragile assumptions could be. These humans, small in size, yet titans in spirit, had already won the first battle without firing a shot. The station remained silent, but the weight of unspoken understanding hung in the air. Humanity's strength was clear. It was not just in ships or weapons, but in the courage to stand firm, the intelligence to calculate wisely, and the unity to act as one. It was a power the Nilari had never truly faced. Finally, Yurik spoke again. We came to test, to measure, to negotiate, but we have learned a lesson we cannot ignore. Earth, your people are a force that cannot be underestimated. We will respect that, and we will choose peace. Harris allowed a small, calm smile. The humans had not fired a single shot. They had not raised a weapon. Yet their message was clear. Humanity stood ready, united, and unyielding. The galaxy had misjudged them for too long. No alien power would ever make that mistake again. The Dauntless shimmered silently in orbit, a giant among the stars, a symbol of human ingenuity, courage, and resolve. Its presence alone had shifted the balance. The Nilari delegation bowed, not in submission but in recognition. Respect had been earned. Pride had been tempered. And humanity, quiet yet unshakable, had won through will alone. As the alien ship slowly retreated, Yurik allowed himself one final glance at Earth. He felt awe and humility. He had thought he understood power, but humans had redefined it before his eyes. Courage, unity, and determination, the true titans of the galaxy, had arrived. Captain Harris turned back toward the viewport, her gaze resting on the Earth below. Humanity had not just survived. Humanity had claimed its place in the stars, unyielding and proud. And the galaxy for the first time understood. Earth was no longer a planet to be tested lightly. Earth was a force to be respected or feared. In the silence that followed, the truth hung among the stars. Humanity stood titan strong, and nothing, not pride, not arrogance, not alien fleets, would ever break them.